Hi everyone, this is Mindy for Honeybee Stamps, and in today's video I have two cards for you. So what we're going to be doing is showing you one stamp in two different ways. Now one of these cards I totally planned out and the other one I did not. Can you guess which one? I'm going to be using the friendship frames and I'm going to be using the stamp set, stencil, and coordinating die set. I cannot resist a good layering stencil. Now, a habit that I've gotten into when it comes to stamping my image and then layering ink on top with a blending brush is by stamping it in a light gray or a light brown ink. So here I have my image or my stamp in my Misti tool, and I'm going to stamp it onto Hammermill Cardstock using the Sandy Beach ink from Gina K Designs. So this is just a really light gray, and there's a lot of detail in this stamp. So I'm pushing down really, really well, but there still are some areas in there that didn't transfer quite good enough. So I'm going to go ahead and ink that up again. I do apologize if you can't see this quite on screen. My lights were pretty bright right now. So I stamped it twice. That gave me a good solid impression everywhere. Now, one thing I want to point out is I did leave that stamp in my Misti tool the way it was. That's very important. So I'm going to be doing my ink blending and using the layering stencils on my Tonic magnetic mat that I have here. So I put some repositionable tape on the back of my cardstock to hold that down on that magnetic surface. Now this layering stencil has about, I can't remember if it's 5 or 6 layers to it. And in the center of it, it tells you what layer is what, whether it's layer 1 of the large flowers or layer 2 of the large flowers. So it'll tell you right on the front there which one it is, so you know what areas you're ink blending. Now I do have a lot of inks pulled out for this, and the reason for that is this is going to be pretty much my focal point or my whole card. So I'm really going to take the time and really add in some detail and dimension to this. I'm starting out with a light Carnation from Gina K Designs, which is a really light pink, and that's going to be the base layer for my large flowers. It was nice and warm outside, a whole 40 degrees where I live, which is a heat wave for us right now. And I am just dying for spring. So I was in a very springy color mood. So now, still leaving this stencil in place, I'm bringing in Passionate Pink, which is a dark pink, and I'm using a smaller blending brush to add some of that dark color to the inside of the big flowers. And then for the ones that I don't quite have the whole piece of the flower or the whole flower image, I'll add it to just one side. So that's going to help give me dimension to those flowers, is just by adding that darker color in there. So I'm removing that first layer, and then I'm going to line up the second layer of the stencil, which is going to fill in some of the other areas of the flower. You could use 2 different colors between stencil 1 and stencil 2, but I am using that same light Carnation, that light pink, and applying it over all of those open areas of the stencil. Then I'm going to come back in with that darker color and bring in some of that detail with that Passionate Pink. This is a really good way to make it look like there's more to your image or your stencils than there really is. So you can use any type of blending brushes that you have on hand. I have my Honeybee Stamps blending brushes dedicated to my Distress Oxides. So I have a few other ones that I like to use with my dye inks, and then I always have some mini blending brushes on hand for these small detail areas. Now I'm moving on to the third layer. I'll probably lose count of my layers here, but this one is going to be adding in these small flowers around the frame. So for this one, I'm doing a light orange, and this is Sweet Mango. All the inks are from Gina K Designs. Once again, just kind of putting in that light area first as a base. And now I'm going to add detail with Tomato Soup, which I don't think I've ever used with my Sweet Mango before, but it is an amazing color to add to get depth into your orange. So once again, just bringing in a small blending brush, and these flowers are kind of small, so in some areas, I'm just going to add it to one side of the flower to help give it some of that dimension. And then our next layer, our fourth layer, is going to kind of help complete some of those flowers, and it also has some other open areas of flowers. So here I'm just going over that open area with that light orange once again. And then for those, I will add in the detail with that Tomato Soup. But first, these are those open flowers, so those smaller flowers. And I changed that up to be sweet corn, which is a nice light yellow. It's also going to fill in some of the centers of the large flowers. For some of those centers, I'm going to bring in wild dandelion and help kind of spruce those up a little bit, just putting it here and there because these areas are getting smaller, which is harder to add depth to. So now for my next layer that I'm going to bring in, this one really is focusing on the center of the flowers. And for that one, I will use my yellows. I think this is my darker yellow, or can't remember if it's my lighter yellow or not. Any yellow will do here just to fill in those areas and help kind of make those centerpieces pop a little bit more. Now we have our last layer of the stencil, and this one is going to be the leaves. So there's only one layer for the leaves, which is where this kind of two-tone shading really helps. So the first round I go with is a key lime, which is a really nice light limey green. So that's going to be the base layer of all of my leaves and the stems. Then I'm going to bring in that fresh asparagus, and I'm going to do the same thing where I'm using a mini blending tool and just kind of picking one side and trying to work my way up into the leaves. And I think this green really helped make everything else pop. It just kind of had that really nice spring contrast to it. So I'll go around and just kind of pick the areas, trying to add some of that darker color too, and that's going to finish off this layer. Now I had purposely left my image in my Misti because I wanted to stamp it in black ink. But when you work in a kitchen, which is where my craft space is, and people are walking in and out, you get distracted. So during this part, I was actually kind of talking to my daughter as I was working, and I just went ahead with the motion and I grabbed the coordinating die. Now, I had also planned on cutting out the centerpiece, which I forgot to grab too, but I went ahead, I lined up that outer image, held it down with some low tack tape, and I die cut that out. Then I'm bringing in that center die piece and just repeating that. I'm lining it up with the image, holding that down with the low tack tape, and die cutting that out. So I needed a quick save to be able to still stamp this in the black ink, and I dug my piece back out of the garbage so I could use that as a placeholder for the piece I die cut out. So glad I thought of that. I don't always think of the solution right away, but I was able to use that as my guide so that it's perfectly placed with the image I have still in my Misti. Then I went ahead and I inked that up with the intense black ink for Honeybee Stamps, just making sure everything is tucked in the corner where it should be, and then pushing that down really well. Now it gets a little nerve-wracking right here because it's stuck to my stamp, so I'm just carefully peeling that off so nothing smears and nothing gets bumped around. I place that back in there and I'm going to ink it up again because I need this to be really good solid lines all over the image. So while I could have really left that in that sandy beach color, I just really had my heart set on seeing how this looked with the black ink, and I'm glad I was able to still do that. I wanted to show you real quick how I'm going to clean this stamp because there's a lot of detailed areas in this. So I'm taking my scrubber block from Hero Arts. I'm putting a little bit of the Ultra Clean spray on there, and I'm going to scrub that while it is still on my Misti tool. Then I just take a rag, a wet rag, and I wipe that Ultra Clean off. So that really got into those kind of detailed areas of the stamp. I have another panel here that I did stamp that in that Sandy Beach ink, and I die cut that out the same way as my blended panel, and I'm going to just attach this behind that blended panel. I like to have stability behind my cardstock because I like to ink blend on 80-pound cardstock, but I just need that to have some more stability behind it. Now another thing that I wanted to do was I wanted to add color behind the panel or behind my ink blended panel. So this is technically going to be my card front. It's 4 1/4 by 5 1/2, and I'm using those same colors that I used on my flowers. So I have Passionate Pink that I placed in a couple areas on the side, and then I'm coming in with that Wild Dandelion. So this is going to show on the very outer edges of my frame and then also in the center. So as I'm blending towards the center, I'm kind of having that fade off into white. Then I brought in that Sweet Mango, and I thought I would just kind of spice that up, give that a little bit more contrast. So I brought in Tomato Soup, and I think this is where my mistake is. Not really a mistake, it wasn't what I was going for, because after everything is blended on, there was just way too much orange showing. And I didn't want that much orange showing at this time. You kind of have your heart set on things, and then when it doesn't go that way, I kind of put that off on the side for now, and I was going to think about it. Now for my sentiment, I had that picked out. I knew what I wanted to do. So this is a 2-piece sentiment. It says, "So very grateful." And then I think the bottom half says, "For your friendship," or something like that. So I knew what I wanted, but what I wasn't sure about was, did I want it heat embossed on black, or did I want it stamped in white or on white cardstock? So I'm going to do both. I have some black cardstock here that I prepped with an anti-static powder tool, and I'm stamping this down in some white pigment ink. Now I'm just being very gentle so I don't kind of squish those, because white pigment ink can get kind of squishy. So I'm just really careful with that. And then I'm sprinkling on the white embossing powder, and then I'm going to melt that with my heat tool. So I went ahead and I cleaned my stamp, and I stamped it in VersaFine black ink onto white cardstock. Then I'm sprinkling on clear embossing powder. So this is going to be nice and shiny. And then I'll be using the coordinating dies to die cut out both sets. I just like to kind of buff over those with a Swiffer cloth to kind of remove any excess powder that's on there, and then die cut them and set them off on the side. So now I can kind of play with my design and figure out what I like more. Did I like the black more, or did I like the white? So this is my ink blended flowers with that ink blended panel I did with my black sentiments. And then I just kind of took that off, and I'm looking at the white ones to try and decide what I like better. Now, I did decide on the white sentiment, but I started thinking maybe I want a white background, because it just felt more, I don't know, it was more springy feeling to me. It was just lighter, and I really liked kind of that lightness of the card. Like I said, so much orange on there. It's just not what I was going for. So I'm going with a white panel instead. I added some of these foam circles to the back, and then I could remove the backing and place that on the front of the card. Now I'm taking the white sentiments, and I'm going to add some foam squares behind them. Now I wanted to show you, this is something I just recently did, is my foam squares were going out of control in my drawer. So I took them all, like these are all the small foam squares, and I put them in these 4x6 photo storage cases. And boy, am I loving this new method for storing my foam squares. It's amazing how something so simple can make us so happy. So I'm adding these white foam squares just in the center of each sentiment, because that is the piece that's going to be connected to the bottom piece of cardstock. The ends are going to kind of overlap my floral frame, which is what's lifted up by those foam circles. So I'll remove the backing of those foam squares. I'm going to add little dabs of glue to the foam squares, so if I need to kind of shift it a little bit, I have that wiggle room. And I'm just using my tweezers to help kind of keep my fingers out of the way so I can get those lined up. Then I decided I wanted to add some embellishments to this. So once again, I just really indecisive on these cards today. I had these Aurora Borealis, takes me a little bit to say that. And then I also had some gold glimmer gems. I decided to go with these clear kind of sparkly ones, and I'm adding them around my sentiment, kind of down at the bottom there, and then trailing up at the top. And then that will finish off this card project. So I really do love how this card came out. It's very light and airy, but I did still have some cardstock off on the side. So these are panels that I was playing with earlier to play with color combinations. I liked that blended panel better that was on the bottom, because there's just some pink, orange, yellow poking out. And then this panel is showing you what that looks like on a card front when I do not stamp it in that black ink. So this is just stamped in that Sandy Beach ink, and it gives you that no line look. So really you can get 2 different looks out of this stamp set, which is why I love using stencils and just being able to stamp it in a lighter color first. And then if I want to go back and add that dark black color for the outline, I can. But leaving it in this light color is always an option. And then that was nice. I was still able to use my heat emboss sentiments that I had done. I hope you enjoyed today's video and card project. I will have all of the supplies listed down below in the video description and over on my blog as well. I want to thank you so much for joining us, and have a wonderful day.